So my main topic is really talking about the difference between when you're at a gig for an acoustic show and an electric show. Because here recently I did another acoustic show and it finally hit me like a ton of bricks. Wow, this is like very drastically different. How do I go from electric gigs to acoustic gigs, and what's my overall like goal as far as my tone? Obviously that's going to change person to person, but like what are you trying to get out of your rig when you go for an acoustic show and an electric show?
Okay, yeah, that's a great topic to bring up. So, well, let's start with your experience that you had.
Yeah.
So, you went from your normal electric rig to your acoustic rig. What did you shoot for? What were you shooting for? Did you accomplish it? What did it look like?
Yeah. So, um, for the electric, I mean, it's pretty simple. I have one amp and I got a small pedal board that I try to use. Depending on the gig size, I might use a bigger board. And just kind of this band, it's more of like a top 40 type thing.
And you're like a 4 or 5 piece band, something like
Yeah.
that? Yeah. And you've got kind of a small spectrum you're trying to stay in to some degree because you do have another guitar player occasionally, off and on.
Right. So I don't have to cover like a huge span of tones. So I try to use a small board. I use a Tweed, sometimes a Vox AC15 head and cab. Really, what it comes down to is, I've got a couple modulation effects, mostly tremolo, some vibe, stuff like that, rotary sounds. And then other than that, it's slapback, long delays, overdrive.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to cover a huge amount of territory. I'm just trying to add some textures, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, so as far as electric, I feel like my goal is to hold down the fort during, the verse and the chorus, and then as far as solo stuff, I can kind of go out on a tangent and then come back.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel like I've totally left the band.
Yeah.
When you play an acoustic, you kind of got to hold down the fort the entire time.
Right.
I mean, there's not really an option to go in left field and come back.
So when you were playing this acoustic gig, were you the only acoustic player?
No, there was another acoustic guitar. So I would play just a little bit of lead, but mostly it's chord based structure. So I couldn't really, obviously, I'm not going to play slide. I'm not going to have a whole lot of modulation.
Yeah.
It comes down to bare bones with an acoustic. My slide is my effect. Other than that, it's just reverb.
Yeah.
I don't like having a chorus on an acoustic, me personally. That's just how I kind of handle that. And then I plug into a preamp, Fishman preamp, and then go to the mains.
Yeah.
So it's not like and I play a GS Mini because, I mean, when it comes down to acoustic pickups, they're all pretty terrible. So I have a GS Mini and I plug in that Fishman preamp and it sounds just as good as about any acoustic guitar.
Right.
And it's low hassle. I love it. It's really simplistic. And it's just like bare bones, gets me to what I need to, and that's pretty much it.
It's a low barrier of entry too. If something happened and your GS Mini got ran over, you could go grab another one at the store and not have to worry about it.
Right.
It's kind of like me taking my deluxe reverb all over the place. It's a reissue. If it fell out of the back of a truck somewhere, I could go grab another one at the store and pretty much be back in business.
Right.
And the GS Mini is so like size-wise, it's easy to haul around.
Oh, it's great.
It's a perfect setup for that. So that completely makes sense for that. Yeah, and when I think of like tones going from acoustic to electric, like I think of electric, you're generally with a bigger band. It's never just you and a singer. So you have to be a little more narrowed in your tones.
Yep.
You got to be in the mids a little bit more. You don't want to cover any frequencies of bass or the kick drum's going to be kicking. You don't want to be super high where if you've got keyboards, you've got high vocalists or anything, you're getting in their way. Even cymbals, which you're not going to get in their way really. And then when I go in acoustic, especially if it's just me, but even with another player, I'm thinking about wide frequency
Yeah,
range.
you want to be as wide as you can to fill that space.
Yeah, within reason,
Yeah.
right? I don't mind chorus on an acoustic for like a certain like a song or a type of song once in a great while. But it would have to I would have to be playing that music to put a chorus pedal on a board for an acoustic. I wouldn't naturally put one on there.
Yeah.
Some type of preamp is huge because you're going to want to notch some like mid-range or like some odd filtering out. You're going to want to filter it. But yeah, I think about just getting super wide, and yeah, you're not going to sound like an acoustic guitar.
No.
You're just not going to sound like one.
Nope.
So you got to give that up, and you've got to just concede to the fact of everybody, when they hear an acoustic guitar in a live gig, they're used to hearing that like under the saddle pickup sound. No matter if you've got mics in your guitars or whatever, that's great. But everyone's used to hearing that under the saddle sound. And they, in their brain now, when they hear live guitar, acoustic guitar, that's what they think of.
Yeah, that's the sound now.
So yeah, that's how I think about approaching is I think about going from a narrow like tone and like EQ structure to a really wide EQ structure.
Yeah, and I think this is interesting. When you go to an electric gig, I'm more likely to switch guitars.
Oh yeah.
You know, when you have different pickups and stuff like that, that makes a huge difference. But with an acoustic, I don't really feel the need to change guitars at all.
No, not unless you've got some crazy tuning. Like you got to switch to DADGAD or
Or a
something.
12 string or whatever.
Yeah, and I mean honestly, I probably would just not play the 12 string. I'd probably play a 6 string.
Yeah.
Unless it's some big commercial gig and I'm getting paid enough money to haul a 12 string guitar too.
Well, yeah.
But that's a different thing. I just, yeah, I think about getting a solid, wide acoustic sound, a little bit of reverb, but electric, yeah, I've got to think narrow. I've got to think about all these like textures and stuff. And I'm not really doing so much texture stuff on the acoustic,
Yeah.
especially if you're playing by yourself with a singer or something. And I love the acoustic thing though. It's fun.
It is fun. And it's one of those things where you're like, okay, I'm getting back to the bare bones of things, you know?
Yeah. Now with two acoustic players, did you think about narrowing your frequency range down some? Were you guys fighting each other at all? Because there's not really, it's not like two electric players where you have different amps. You guys both have acoustic guitars with, acoustic
So
guitar pickups.
he plugs straight into the mains. So he had kind of a mid-range sound because he plugged straight into the mains.
Yeah.
With my preamp, I could take the wide spectrum, which was kind of funny because I had this little GS Mini with a wide sound. But, that's what worked.
It just goes to show you that like it doesn't take, it's all about having the right equipment. It's not necessarily about, what always looks the part. Sometimes just having the right piece. And that Fishman preamp for what you're using is exactly what you needed.
Right.
Widens everything. It's great. Anyway, be curious what you guys think about this stuff. Put it down below. We'll see you guys next week.
See ya.